Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel. If you notice, I have something new behind me today. My amazing mother, for my birthday, wanted to get me something for my YouTube channel. So she got me this backdrop and the whole frame, and I think it's very fun. So you might notice this behind me in a few videos coming up. If you notice any wrinkles, sorry, I'm still trying to figure out how to keep it ironed, but also store it, and I'll figure it out. But it is a very fun addition, so thank you, Mother. And I have read some amazing books the past little bit, and one kind of a dud, so I am excited to talk about those, and let's jump into that. So this first book was a recommendation from Audrey over at Audrey Approved, so make sure to check out her channel. I will put a link down below. And this book was The Big Burn, Teddy Roosevelt and the Fire That Saved America by Timothy Egan. And this book is following a horrible fire in 1910 that went over. It was a huge fire, burned up parts of Washington, Idaho, Montana, and it's talking a lot about the fire, so there's a lot of excitement that way, and also the formation of the Forest Service. And I thought that premise-wise, I wasn't so sure what I was going to think about this book, but going into it, I found a lot of things that I thought were really interesting. We get some interesting personalities early on in the book. They talk about William A. Clark, and I was sitting there thinking, I know who that is, and I couldn't figure out why I knew who that was. And I realized that I had read another book a little while ago called Empty Mansions, The Mysterious Life of Huguette Clark and the Spending of a Great American Fortune. And that one was following William A. Clark's daughter. And he was filthy rich, very corrupt. So I enjoyed this for kind of the connections that I was making to other things. They talked about the formation of the Bull Moose Party, and I remember doing a report on that in junior high, and I really was excited because I never see anything that talks about the Bull Moose Party. And so there were little like snippets and I'm like, oh, I know about this. Oh, I know about this. One thing I thought was so crazy. At one point in the book, they talk about how they're all going out to try to fight this fire, and they start by shooting cannons into the air for a couple hours to try to get it to rain. And the book moves on from that. I'm like, what did I miss? What are they doing? Anyways, I was looking it up, and I am going to put a link to a Smithsonian article down below if you're interested in this. But the crazy history of people feeling like they could induce rain and have control over the weather. And a lot of it was, oh, you know what causes rain? Loud sounds. So we'll shoot some cannons into the sky. And I thought that that was just kind of a crazy tidbit. So yeah, if you want to check out the Smithsonian article, I thought that was really fascinating. So overall, I enjoyed some of the little tidbits of knowledge I got from it. I feel like at points the book might have been a little dull, which I think is hard to do because it's about a giant fire. There was a lot of excitement going on in this, but I learned so many little things from it. I enjoyed it. So yeah, highly recommend if you want a nonfiction. I think that this one was a fun one to pick up. Now, if you ever ask me what nonfiction you should read, I always recommend the author Patrick Radden Keefe. So I picked up the book Rogues, True Stories of Grifters, Killers, Rebels, and Crooks. And I was really excited because he wrote Say Nothing and Empire of Pain, and I thought those were just some of the most excellent nonfiction books. And so I was really excited to pick this up. Now, this was excellent. Don't get me wrong. Each chapter is a different long-form journalistic story, and we cover so many different topics. So much gets touched on. We talk about, killers, and we talk about public defenders, and we talk about drug trafficking, and so many different things, and learning about all those subjects was super interesting, and I feel like Patrick Radden Keefe does an excellent job. So I highly recommend this book. The part that I didn't find to be super successful to me was the title. Just putting all these together into a collection and trying to make it have an overarching theme, I thought it was a bit of a reach. So True Stories of Grifters, Killers, Rebels, and Crooks. Anthony Bourdain was the subject of one of those. I'm like, okay, he's a rebel in the food industry. I don't feel like I would put him in the same category as someone who probably murdered their brother. Like, that just doesn't quite make sense to me. If this book had just been titled something a little less themey and just let me know that it was a collection of articles by Patrick Radden Keefe, I would have been on board. But instead, I kept thinking, how does this go back to what it says it's going to be about? And so I didn't really feel like that was super cohesive, but that's a silly thing. So if you want to read this book, just know that not all of them are going to be grifters and killers and all this stuff. It's just some really, really interesting long-form journalism pieces. So for nonfiction, super good. I really enjoyed it. So a little while ago, I read the book Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier, and it was good. I thought it had some good creepy atmosphere, but it was a little predictable. I just didn't feel like there was a lot going into it. It was just kind of, it was good, it was fine. But on that video, I had quite a few people saying that their favorite book by this author was actually My Cousin Rachel. So I went and read My Cousin Rachel. This was 5 stars. This is my favorite too. This was so good. So this is following Philip Ashley, and he has an older cousin who takes him in and raises him, and it's this single cousin. When Philip is in his early 20s, his older cousin goes off and ends up getting married to this woman named Rachel. And shortly after this, there are some letters that cause Philip a little bit of anxiety, and his uncle ends up dead. So the plot thickens when Rachel comes to the estate to stay with Philip and as his cousin's widow. This isn't a murder mystery in that you're trying to figure out who done it or what. It's more of a slow, did she have something to do with this death, or was it natural causes and she's innocent? That's kind of what you're debating the whole time. And you get Philip being naive, never been around women before kind of character. And is she an evil seductress that's probably gonna kill again, or is she just a woman trying to live her life? And I thought that the reason that this really worked for me is I thought there were so many layers. So we start out with Philip at this estate, and it is such a male environment. And then bringing in Rachel, it brings this female presence, which is very foreign and exciting, but also could be dangerous. And just watching that, those gender dynamics throughout the book, and are women always perceived as either a romantic interest or a threat? Is that how women are perceived in this society? What made her seem threatening? Was it that she was an independent woman, or was it that she had sneaky, terrible motives and was going to murder someone? We just don't know. I really liked how it ended, and I don't want to say how it ended, but I feel like there's so much that you can go into and interpret in your own sort of way and get different messages out of. So I thought that not only was this a little bit of a creepy, what's going on kind of thing, but it had layers, which I loved. I also just feel like depending on who you are, the time of life, you could read it in so many different ways. And so for me, reading it, I didn't feel for Philip. It's told through Philip's perspective, but I didn't feel for him. Instead, I felt more nervous for Rachel going into this very male-dominated environment. And because you could sense that animosity that Philip had before she even arrived. I absolutely adored this book. I thought that there were just so many things that you could think about. If you've read this book, let me know what did you take away from it, because I thought it was exciting, interesting, couldn't put it down, really good, and also just still felt very relevant and up there. When it was published in 1951, it didn't feel old or stuffy. It felt very exciting and now, and I really liked it. I read the book The Changeling by Victor Laval, and it says, one man's thrilling journey through an enchanted world to find his wife, who has disappeared after seemingly committing an unforgettable act of violence. Now, that's not what this book was, at least not from my perspective, and I think it's maybe what the book was trying to be, but it was just so unfocused. So we started out with a really sweet romance, and I thought it was really cute. You watch as he falls in love with his wife, and you get him learning to be a bookseller and creating a business. You get that whole thing, and I thought that that was really sweet. Like, the writing in that, it was lovely. All the writing was good, but just the structure just did not work. Because then it went from this light, sweet thing to this horrible, you think maybe it's gonna be like a family tragedy, trying to move past things. And then we go from that into kind of like this dystopian camps war scene. And then it just kind of moves into like horror and Lord of the Rings. I was so confused. I get that this book was trying to be some sort of urban fantasy, but I feel like there's a way to do that that feels cohesive. And this felt like 4 different books that were stuck together, and the author just tried to say, oh yeah, it's the same characters. This is all still the same story, even though none of it really stuck together for me. Like, when I finished the book, my first thoughts were, what did I just read? What was this? I wasn't quite expecting the such fantasy elements. I thought it was more of a horror for a while, and then it ended up being really fantasy, and that's not quite the tone that I felt like the book had, so that was a little confusing. Something that really bothered me in this was that in each section of the book, we'd be introduced to new characters. So there's the wife's best friend, and she seemed like a kind of more fleshed out character, and we never see her again throughout the book. And then we have just different characters that show up and then are never talked about. The leader of the whatever island. What was going on with all that? None of this came back together. The writing in it had some really pretty nice moments. Like, I really thought the romance was really sweet and how things came together towards the beginning, but then it just went so off the rails for me. So it's like 2 stars. It's not unreadable. I read the whole thing, couldn't put it down, wanted to know what happened on this Bizarro train. I can't recommend it. It was so weird, and all the characters somehow seem like really good with murder all the time and stuff. There was just some stuff that I'm like, who is doing this? Why? What is happening? Anyways, yeah, this one, The Changeling, maybe just avoid, at least from my perspective, it was weird. And those are the books that I have read the past week or so. If you have any comments on these books, please let me know in the comments down below. And I should be back in the next week or so with another book wrap up. So I will see you all on the next one.